Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Today, I'm Sean, and I'm part of the ESPC team. I'm delighted you're joining us for today's ESPC community webinar. This session is part of Microsoft Fabric Week, proudly sponsored by Actarius. Today, we're thrilled to have Ben Jarvis with us to present Unlocking Business Value with Microsoft Fabric and a Data-Driven Culture. We love hearing from our community, so join on the conversation on LinkedIn, X, and Blue Sky. Tag us and share us on what you learned. We'd love to hear your takeaways. Explore even more great content on our Learning Hub, packed with fresh blogs, ebooks, how-to videos, and past webinars. Just head over to our website and click the Content tab at the top. Don't let the learning stop here. Join us for our next session, Unstructured Data Transformation in Fabric using AI Functions with Sandeep Pawar, happening Thursday, May 29th at 3 p.m. CEST. Find out more at sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Looking to level up your Microsoft Fabric skills? Then don't miss FabCon Europe, the European Microsoft Fabric Community Conference happening 15 to 18 September in Vienna. With 3 inspiring keynotes, 10 full-day tutorials, and 130 plus sessions covering real-time analytics, data engineering, Power BI, governance, and more. It's an event not to miss. Scan the QR code or visit sharepointeurope.com/European Microsoft Fabric Community Conference. One hands-on learning, we've launched FabCon Europe tutorials covering Power BI, Purview, SQL, data agents, and more. Learn from Microsoft experts and apply skills immediately. Save €150 today and with use code FabricWeek150. After the presentation, we'll have a questions and answers session. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to type in the questions box and Ben will address them at the end of the webinar. This session will be recorded and added to Resource Center. Will you be notified by email when it's available? And now I'm going to hand you over to Ben. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today's session. So my name's Ben Jarvis, and I'm the CTO for Data and AI at Telefonica Tech UK. And today's session will be around unlocking business value with Microsoft Fabric and a data-driven culture. So apologies that I'm not on video today. I've been having some laptop issues this morning, but we should be good for today's session. So we'll continue as we are. So just to give a bit of background on me, so I'm currently the CTO for Data and AI at Telefonica Tech, and I've spent over 12 years working in IT, and that's been spread across application development, infrastructure and DevOps, and now data engineering. And over the last 7+ years, I've spent my time working for Telefonica Tech, and in that time been working with lots of clients to deliver data and AI solutions, mainly focused on Azure. And that's been across lots of different technologies, from the likes of Synapse and Data Lake Analytics through to now, obviously focusing on Microsoft Fabric. So today's session is really to talk about some of the things that I've seen in my time working in the data space, and some of the challenges that I've seen clients having in terms of how they get value from their data platform. Because we see lots of people want to make that big investment in data, but there's not actually that many organizations out there that are truly data driven and actually using data to drive that value within their organizations. So for today's session, we'll start looking at what some of those challenges are. Then we'll look at some of the potential techniques we can use to address those challenges. Then we'll dive into some of the practical steps we can take and some of the tools out there we can use to help us overcome those challenges. And then we'll start to talk about how Fabric and Purview fit into that space and how they can help us solve some of those problems and solve some of those challenges of driving adoption in a data platform. And we'll finish that section up with a quick demo of both of those tools working together. And then finally, we'll wrap up, and I'll pass on a few links of how to find out more, and pass on my contact details as well if you're interested in learning more about this subject. So so as a starter, we'll start looking at those challenges and what's stopping people from actually getting that value from their data platforms. And something we see a lot now is that there's data everywhere within organizations, and that's spread across, your line of business systems like your CRMs and ERPs, but also things like spreadsheets, flat files that are flying around the place like CSV files and those kind of things. And then you've obviously got people that are now creating their own reports and creating their own dashboards, but also starting to build AI models and use some of the off-the-shelf AI tools out there like ChatGPT and those kind of things. So that creates a situation where you've got lots of fragmented data across lots of different systems flying around the organization. And what that creates is a situation where you have some conflict in terms of the definitions of metrics and definitions of specific entities within the organization. So take something like revenue, you might go to one part of the business and they've got one definition of it. And take something like customer, you could have one side of the business that defines a customer in one way and another side that defines a customer in another. And that leads to us having a lack of governance around how we're actually using data. So we don't know what data exists and where that data is being used. And it means that we don't have that high quality data that we can use for analytics and use to actually drive that value from our data sets. And that in turn means that we start to build up these kind of cottage industries or bits of shadow IT around the organization where people are going off and doing their own thing, building their own reports and building their own AI solutions. And we're not creating that single source of truth or consistent view of all of the data across the organization. And this in turn causes a number of problems. So it means that we can't start to get that value, drive that value from our data. It means that our users start to get frustrated because they can't get the data they want when they need it. And it means that it's difficult for us to start innovating. So lots of organizations that I'm talking to are wanting to use tools like generative AI, but they're in a situation where they don't have that strong data foundation and they're not in that position where they've actually got good quality data that they can rely on. And that in turn means that we can't start to drive that value from data. It becomes a headache in terms of governance and compliance because we don't know what data is being used where. And that in turn means that we drive lots of additional costs, both in terms of reworking solutions that are being built, but also delaying that value to the business and in turn creating risk because we're not able to use that data in a sensible way. And a lot of these problems come down to a key issue, which is that kind of that brick wall that exists between IT teams, so the likes of your data engineers, data scientists, and your data analysts, and the business teams who are actually looking to use that data and actually want to get hands-on with the data and drive value. And that tends to come down to a few different reasons. So on the IT side, the IT teams are very focused on that technical implementation and using tools to ingest and transform data. And they don't necessarily have that understanding of what the business is actually looking to do with data. So they're not hands-on in the business day to day. So they don't understand the real challenges that the business have. There's also a lack of capability generally. So particularly with new tools, like the IT team is generally kind of learning on the job. So you've got that issue of having to learn the technology while you're working, but also having to understand how the business is working. And then there's also tends to be a lack of direction. So in terms of not having that clear set of objectives or clear backlog of items that are going to drive that value and going to be of high priority for the business to work on. And then on the business side, there's no real common language. So the business don't talk the same language as IT. So you talk to the business about a table of data, or you talk to them about a Power BI dashboard or a Power BI data set, and they don't really know what you're talking about. So it's difficult for them to really engage with those IT teams and get across what it is that they're looking to achieve. There's also a general lack of trust in the data. So there might have been failed initiatives previously where they've not managed to get that value from data, or the poor quality data has been delivered to the business. They've not been able to get to a point where they can actually trust that data and drive value from it. And then they get frustrated because it takes a long time for the IT teams to actually deliver a solution. And they don't have the skills to actually get the value from the data once that solution has been delivered. So we tend to have those kind of barriers between the business and between the IT teams that stop us driving that value and getting that buy-in from the business to actually build a solution that's going to be valuable to them. And this causes a large impact on businesses overall. So one of the really shocking stats is that 85% of data initiatives fail to deliver return on investment. And organizations are spending huge amounts of money on building out data platforms and building AI solutions. And if those solutions aren't delivering return on investment, then it's going to be difficult to get that buy-in from the business to spend more money and drive more value from data. And having poor data quality on average costs about £9.6 million to a business. So if you don't have that good quality data, then it's ultimately costing you money as a business. But on the other hand, organizations that do become data driven and do get to the point where they can drive that value from their data are 23 times more likely to acquire customers and 19 times more likely to be profitable. So there is real value in doing this, and it is using data gives you that competitive edge and allows organizations to take advantage of some of those new technologies such as AI and deliver those cost savings and revenue gains that data and AI can drive for them. So in terms of the next section, we'll be looking at how do we actually drive some value within a platform, and how do we actually get to a point where the business can get that value from data. So if you look at any data platform that's out there, they follow a similar structure. So you've got some kind of unified storage where we're ingesting data and using that as a landing zone to get data into the platform. Then they have some kind of governance layer on top of that to help you understand what data is in the platform and where that data is being used. And then you have the compute layer that sits on top of that enables you to actually exploit that data and query it and transform it and get it into the format that you're looking to move it to. And a lot of those platforms have the same attributes about them. So they're described as cost optimized, performant, scalable, cloud native. And they've got all of these really technical attributes that are used to describe them. But ultimately, if we don't consider that business element of the platform, we end up in the same situation. So we can have the shiniest tool out there from a tech point of view. But if we're not considering that business element, then we're never going to get to a place where the business can actually use the data. And these are some of the kind of typical conversations that we see between the business and IT. So the business might be asking, where can I find out how many active customers we have? And IT will come back with an answer saying something like, check this table where the records have this status code. And that's a very technical thing for the business to understand. So it's quite difficult for them to get that understanding of where to get that data from and where that data is available to them. Or you might have situations where there's misunderstandings in terminology. So the business might say, what's my revenue for this year? And then IT team gives them one number. And they say that doesn't sound right because they understand what those values should be and have a rough ballpark figure of what they're expecting. And the IT team might not be considering that the financial year is running from April to April, so it covers a specific period and it falls outside of what IT is running as their query. So although we have that platform that has all of that data in, we don't necessarily, as an IT team, have that understanding of how the data should be used and how it's going to be most valuable to the business. So the way that we can solve this is by thinking of data implementations as a wider exercise. So rather than just thinking about the data and the technology that goes on top of that, so having that scalable and secure platform where we can ingest data, transform it, and do all of the cool stuff with it, we need to consider some other elements like considering enablement. So ensuring that we've got a data catalog in place and a business glossary so the business can understand what data exists in the platform, what the definitions are of that data, and how that data can be used. So what are some of the use cases for those specific data sets? Then layering on top of that is the governance piece. So it's about understanding what data we've got in the platform, where that data is used, and also understanding what the level of sensitivity of that data is and ensuring that we're securing it appropriately based on that level of sensitivity. And then finally, it's about the people side. So that's about ensuring that we've got that executive sponsorship and everything we do within a data platform implementation is aligned to some kind of business objective, and ensuring that we're considering that change management element as we're building a platform and ensuring that we're actually upskilling the business as part of this process. So how do we actually go about solving some of these problems? So the first step is to identify a use case. And generally what we want to be doing is aligning everything we do in the data space to some kind of business objective. So in order to identify those use cases, we need to understand what the objectives are of the business. So is it to increase revenue? Is it to break into a new market? You know, all of those kind of things that the business is looking to achieve. We then want to understand what the measures of success are for that objective. So trying to take what could be quite a woolly objective and turn it into something that's measurable. So getting that understanding of how the business wants to use that data and what's going to be successful, what their measures of success are going to be for those objectives. We then want to understand what some of the key levers are in terms of how we can influence those measures of success. So what are some of the key actions that we can take to influence whether those measures will be, you know, heading in the right direction or heading in the wrong direction. And then from those two things, we can start to understand what kind of data products we want to be building in the platform. So what kind of data sets are needed to inform those decisions that need to be taken. So if we just work through an example of this for a manufacturing client, so an objective at the business level might be to increase gross margin by improving efficiency and cost management. So that's quite a woolly objective. You know, there's nothing that we can use. There's some key metrics called out there, but no real measures of success for those metrics. So if we look at some of the potential measures that the business can look at to increase that gross margin, they might say that they want to reduce their raw material costs by 10%. They might say they want to increase the production of their high margin items by 5%. And they might say they want to achieve a 12% reduction in distribution costs. So these are all things that we can easily measure and easily get that understanding of whether they're trending in the right direction or whether they're trending in the wrong direction. And from those key metrics, we can start to understand what some of the actions we can take to influence them are. So in terms of reducing our raw material costs, we might want to look at our financial system so we understand what those raw material costs are. So we have an understanding of how we can reduce them. We then might want to look at our contracts with our suppliers to see if we can buy our materials in a more efficient way. And then we might also want to look at something like our bill of materials if we're in the manufacturing space, so we can understand what levels of each material we're using and how and try to optimize that, how we're actually building our products so that we reduce those material costs. So from that kind of top level objective, we can start to get that understanding of what those data products need to be and what those data points are that we need to start considering. So before we move on, we'll just have a quick recap of what is a data product. So a data product is basically a collection of data assets that provide some kind of business value independently, is aligned to some kind of business objective, and adheres to a set of standards. So it's basically a set of data that's going to provide some kind of value to the business and provide that value in a consistent way. And it can be made up of lots of different things. So it could be something like a star schema for analytics. It could be a reporting data set, so like a semantic model in Power BI. It could be a machine learning model that's predicting some kind of metric or telling you when to take some form of action. It could be a dashboard that's used to make decisions, or it could be something like an API that's used to expose data for integration. So it's essentially anything that's data related that's going to drive some kind of business value. And essentially what we want to do when we're building out data products is package up all of the data that's needed to build that product, but also the code that's needed to transform that data, and then the metadata and infrastructure. So the infrastructure that's used to actually process it, and then the metadata that tells us what it is and how it can be used. And we want to be taking that data and transforming it into some kind of value that either drives decisions or actions. And because we're focused on a specific business outcome, we can start to understand, we can start to prioritize those items and align them to some kind of number, so that makes it simple for us to prioritize and understand what the impact of building that data product is. So as an example, if we had a full view of our bill of materials, then we can start to optimize material use and identify cost saving opportunities. And that's going to drive some kind of increase in our gross margin. The same with understanding what we're spending with our suppliers. We can negotiate better pricing and reduce our raw material costs. And that's going to drive some kind of specific saving in our costs. And then if we had an end-to-end view of our distribution network, then we can look at how we're utilizing our supply chain resources and make it as efficient as possible. And again, that's going to drive some kind of reduction in our distribution costs. So because we're speaking to the business about what kind of outcomes they want to drive with this data, we can start to put a measure on it and start to put a number on what kind of value that's going to drive. And that starts to make those conversations with the business around how they're going to invest and how they're going to where they're going to put their focus a lot simpler than they are if we're not focused on those business outcomes. The other key thing with the data products is ensuring that we align them to a consistent set of standards. And these include things like ensuring they're valuable, so ensuring they're tied to that business objective, ensuring they're discoverable, so the business knows where they exist, ensuring they're trustworthy, so we know the business knows they're of good quality and there's no data quality issues that are going to prevent them making decisions or cause them to make the wrong decisions. But also making them accessible, so they're easy to access and it's easy to request access to them, and ensuring that they're secure, so we're applying the right security rules and ensuring that we're securing that sensitive data in the right way. So with these standards, we can start to kind of build that consistency across our data team and ensure that we're delivering that consistent product that is usable to the business and is going to help them drive some value from their data sets. And I've called out a few of these already, but some of the key attributes that we need for our data products are things like having a clear owner, so someone from the business that can be the champion for that data product and can ensure it's aligning to those standards, but also work with the business to ensure it's driving that value. Then it's about ensuring it's discoverable, so making sure it exists, the business know where to find it, how to get access to it, and they know what it is and how it can be used. Then there's ensuring that we've got that right quality in place, so making sure we've got those data quality metrics, so we understand what level of quality the data is of. And then it's about that adoption piece, so ensuring that we're gathering feedback from the business and ensuring that we're building a roadmap and a plan to develop that product going forwards. So it's not just a one and done, we build this and then we go off and leave the business to use it. It's something that's constantly evolving and is constantly being changed over time. And as part of that process, we want to take an agile approach to delivering these data products. So we want to come in and identify those use cases, but then we want to quite quickly understand if it's actually feasible for us to deliver that product. So we can do a quick experiment and understand what level of feasibility there is, and is it something that's actually a goer. We then want to go off and build the solution and really quickly get it into the hands of the business so they can test that it's providing them some value. And then we want to get it deployed into production and do some monitoring and start gathering some feedback so that we can start to evolve it over time and ensure that we're taking into account the use cases of the business in terms of how we develop that product going forwards. The final element that's really important is that people piece that I mentioned in those 4 elements of a data culture. So obviously, as we go through this process, we need to get those really key stakeholders involved from the business side and ensure that we're involving them in the right way. And part of that process involves us looking to map out those stakeholders and understand how they want to interact with our product, and understand how enthusiastic they are in terms of actually driving that value from data, or are they people that need a bit of help along, and maybe potentially a bit of training to help them on that journey to using data to drive that value. And to do that, we can start to look at how we can start to put those individual people within the business into different buckets. So starting to understand who are the optimists, so people that have some experience of what we're delivering, but maybe need some help to define their objectives and find that clear use case that's going to deliver value. Through to understanding who the skeptics are, so the people that haven't used data before and are unclear on whether it's going to deliver value to them, and they might need a bit of extra helping along in terms of training and support to help them understand what value data is going to bring. Then you've got your advocates, so they're the people that are kind of your super users and the people that know what their goal is and they have the experience to achieve that goal. So they're the people that we want to nurture and get really closely involved in the process so they can feel like they're part of it and be the ones driving it. And then we've got our enthusiasts, who are the people that can see the value of data but need some support to develop their experience and take them on that journey to the point where they can actually use it in practice. So again, they're the targets for our training and upskilling. So it's really key that as part of that process, we're taking into account those different groups of users and starting to understand what support they need on that journey and what support they need once that data product has been delivered so that they can actually get the value from it. And from the enablement and guardianship side of the data culture piece, it's really important that we have all of these elements in place. So ensuring that we're documenting the objectives that our data products are aligned to, ensuring that we've got some data governance policies and we've got that set of standards that we can align all of the work we're doing to. But also ensuring that we've got that business glossary, so the business understand what the data is and how it should be used. And then ensuring we've got things like data quality, we've got that clear ownership, we've got workflows so that users can get access to the data products. And we've got a catalog so that people know what data products are out there and how they can be used and how they can be accessed. And then ensuring that we've split those into domains and we're starting to align them to specific business areas and having that clear ownership of each area of the business. So now we'll talk about where Fabric and Purview fit into this. So obviously, I'm sure most people here know what Fabric is, but just as a quick recap, Fabric is the bringing together of all of the tools that are needed to build a data platform into a single software as a service solution. And that's underpinned by OneLake, which is that unified storage layer, with Microsoft Purview as that unified governance layer, and then various compute tools that sit on top of those to allow you to ingest data into the platform, but also start to transform it and start to drive that value from it. And Fabric is really great at helping us with that process to take data end to end. So ingesting data from the source systems, landing it into OneLake, and then transforming it into some kind of model that's going to drive value at the end. So it's really good with that whole technical process of taking data end to end through that process. Purview is kind of the other side to it. So it's around giving us that governance tool and giving us that data marketplace so the business can understand what data exists and we can ensure that we're governing that data appropriately. And it covers a number of key areas, and each of those has different audiences. So the first one is data security. So that's about understanding who has access to data and having workflows in place to provision access to that data. Then you've got the data governance piece, which is around having those definitions, having lineage in place, so we understand where data has come from, and ensuring that we've got that marketplace in place so data consumers can understand what data is out there. And then there's the risk and compliance side, which is around ensuring that we're mitigating any risks around specifically sensitive data and ensuring that we're aligning to any compliance policies or compliance rules that we have to align to as an organization. So it's a really wide spanning product, and it covers both the data stack in terms of the likes of Fabric and some of the other data tools out there, but it also covers some of the more modern workplace elements, so things like SharePoint and the Office 365 side of the stack as well. So it's a really broad product that covers lots of different areas. It has involvement from lots of different stakeholders. And in terms of how it interacts with Fabric, I kind of see Purview as that wrapper around Fabric. So you've got Fabric that's there as your compute, and there as your layer where users are interacting with data and users are transforming it and getting access to that data. And then it has two kind of key responsibilities in this space. So the first is around governance and security. So that's where your data governance team and your InfoSec team are understanding what data is in the platform, where that sensitive data is, and ensuring that it's governed appropriately. But then the side of it that we'll be talking about today is as that data marketplace. So as that kind of front door to the platform for those data consumers, so they can understand what data exists in the platform and where that data should be used. And in terms of what we're talking about today, and in terms of building out data products, Purview helps us in a number of ways. So it provides us with that unified catalog, so users can understand what data products are available, and they've got that business glossary and the right metadata in place, so they understand what the data is and how they can use it. It also gives us that lineage and metadata, so we can understand where the data is originated from, how it's been transformed, and who's using it. It's also given us that method to manage access to the platform. So it's given us ways so that users can request access to a data product, and having approval flows and automation around actually provisioning the access to those products. It also provides us with monitoring, so we can start to understand what level of quality that data is of, and give us that kind of data observability element, so we can understand how that data quality is trending over time and whether we're starting to get quality issues creeping in. And then it's also got that really close integration with the tools that we're talking about. So particularly with Power BI and Fabric, it works really well alongside them and integrates really closely with those tools. And the kind of way that I see it aligning with those four elements of a data culture that I've mentioned is that Fabric is covering that technology and enablement piece. So it's given us the technology platform to transform our data, ingest and transform our data. And then it's given us that enablement layer to enable self-service and enable users to get that really easy access to data. And then Purview is really covering those, is still a bit in the enablement space from that data marketplace point of view, but it's also covering those guardianship and people elements, so we can help people on that journey and help them to get that understanding of the data that's in the platform. So I'll now dive into a quick demo just to show some of the features of Purview and some of the features of Fabric and Purview, and show how all of this hangs together. So I'll just stop sharing my screen quickly. Switch over to the demo. Okay. So what I've set up here is an example Fabric workspace, which has a typical data product within it. So what I've mocked up here is us ingesting some data from a couple of different source systems. So we've got an ERP source, which contains some financial data from an ERP system. I'll just wait for this to spin up so we can have a quick look at some of the data sets.
I can ask a question if that's right, Ben.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one question is, great session, thank you. We have Fabric and Purview, but struggle as column level details within our lakehouses are not available as separate data assets in Purview. Hence, linking business context, technical assets becomes a problem. Please share your views.
Yeah, so that is one of the limitations of Purview currently, is that you're not able to get that column level view of table and column level view of the data that's within the lakehouse. I know that is something that's being addressed, so it is something that's coming soon. But what I have found is that when you attach those, when you attach the elements of a lakehouse to a semantic model, it does then bring through the table and column level details. So from a business point of view, if you're interacting with that semantic model, then you're able to get that level of detail as well. But it is definitely one of the current limitations of the tool.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, we've got some ERP data here. So this just has some details on general ledger accounts. Then we've got some financial data that's coming through in our general ledger entry table. It's been a bit slow today, sorry. And then we've also got some project data that's in our project table and some company level data. So the kind of typical sort of financial data that you'd see in an ERP system. And then we've also got some reference data that goes on top of this. Sorry, Fabric has been slightly slow today. So yeah, just in the interest of time, I won't show that, but we've also got some reference data that sits on top of this. And that's basically given us some details of how that general ledger structure rolls up into a P&L, and also how and some various other details as well. And essentially what we're doing is taking that data and transforming it into a Power BI model, sorry, a data product that allows us to do some financial analysis on our data. So it allows us to, sorry, the demo gods don't seem to be with me today. So it allows us to basically take that financial data and pull it into a dimensional model, so we can then do that P&L type reporting on it and start to get that understanding of where our costs are and where revenue is coming from and all of those kind of things. And that's then also been stored in a lakehouse, and that lakehouse has facts and dimensions in, which I'll try to show in a second. And essentially so we've got this data set in here, and we, for the sake of the demo, we'll say we know that data is of high quality. You know, it's been through our testing process, and we know that we've got that good quality financial data that the business can then rely on. But we need a way so that the business can start to understand what that data is and how it can be used. And that's basically where Purview comes in. So within Purview, what we've done is ingested the data from Fabric. Sorry, I'll just sign in again.
So want me to ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Another question is, we have AWS Databricks as our data ingestion engine, as we use AWS as our cloud provider for many of our systems. Scanning AWS Databricks is a challenge for Purview. Any insights on whether this will improve in future?
Yeah, so Purview does support scanning Unity Catalog. So there is the ability to scan a Databricks Unity Catalog instance. I've not actually used it with the AWS version of Databricks, so I'm not sure what those specific limitations are, but yeah, happy for you to get in contact with me after the session and have a look at it if that's something you're interested in.
Perfect, thanks, Ben.
Cool. Yeah, so what I've done in Purview is asked it to scan our Fabric tenant. So basically all I've had to do is go in and set up a connection to Fabric, and then that then allows Purview to start cataloging the data within Fabric and running scans to discover all of the assets that I've got within Fabric. And if I pop back to the data map, we can then see these assets here. So this is just the raw data that Purview has basically cataloged from my Fabric instance. So it's picked up all of my notebooks that I'm using to transform the data. It's picked up my lake houses, my Power BI data sets, and all of those other components that I've got within my Fabric instance. And this, on the face of it, isn't that useful to the business because it's just giving us, you know, what we already have in the Fabric portal, so the user can go and browse all of these assets themselves. But where the real value comes in is within the unified catalog within Purview. So this is basically the entry point to data within your business, and it's the place where those data consumers can go to understand what data is out there and start to understand what data sets are going to be suited to their specific use case. So what we've done in here is we've created a couple of data products. So essentially what I can do if I want to create a new one is I can create a data product, give it a name, give it a description, select its type, so whether it's like a data set or whether it's something like a machine learning model or a dashboard. And then I can select what kind of audience it has. So is it more technically focused and for your data engineers and data scientists, or is it something like a business user or an exec is going to use? And then we can provide some other business details for that as well. So like what kind of use cases it's suited to, and what kind of business outcomes is it driving. And what I've done here is create a couple of data products. So I've created a finance data product, which is just basically wrapping our Lakehouse up as a data product in Purview. And basically what we've added here is a description. So it's a curated data set that's focused on financial information used for analysis, reporting and decision making. And we've given it some use cases that it can be used for. And because this is more of this is a Lakehouse, we've said that the audience is going to be our engineers, analysts and scientists, so the more technically minded users. And basically what we've been able to do is tag our data assets, so our Lakehouse and our SQL endpoint, as part of that data product. So it's basically giving that business wrapper on top of those technical assets that we've got within Fabric. And what I'll do is show the other example, which is our semantic model that has a bit more of that business context on. So this is our financial performance model, and this is where we've created a semantic model within Power BI that's taken some of the elements of the finance data product and basically combining them into a semantic model that's going to be usable by users within the business. So the audience of this one is more your data analysts and your business analysts and your business users who want to self-serve on that data and want to drive some value from it. And what we've done here is given this a description. So we've said it's an analytical model that's designed to measure and evaluate some of those key financial metrics like revenue, profit, and cost efficiency. And we've said we've also added some attributes here, like where it's located, so a link to actually access it in Power BI, some details of the refresh frequency, and then also a contact for support. So we're able to kind of augment this with lots of different detail and lots of information to help the business understand what that data is and how it can be used. And then we've also got some details on the use cases. So for this one, it's more around monitoring profitability and growth, identifying cost saving opportunities, and supporting decision making. And then we've also got other attributes here, like who the owner is, what governance domain it belongs to. So this is finance related. And then we can add some links to documentation and links to terms of use as well as some data quality metrics. So we've got that ability to build like a really rich sort of landing page for our data products, so the business can quite easily understand what the data is and how it can be used, and get that kind of head start in terms of getting value from that data quickly, because they've got access to all of this information they need to understand what it is, how they can access it, who the support contact is, and all of those kind of things, and get that head start really quickly. So basically what I've done is populated all of this information, and I've also attached this to our data assets. Sorry, I'll just stop my notifications. I've tried to close everything down, but they still come through. Let's put this to do not disturb. So yeah, what we've done here is we've tagged this to our semantic model. So I've attached this to our data assets, and then, as was mentioned earlier, this is then bringing through all of those one lake tables. So it's bringing through that table level information and bringing through any descriptions or other attributes about those tables. I'll show you some more on this in a second when we go into the business elements of it. So what we've also done is attach this to some glossary terms. So we've called out some of the key metrics that are in that model. So things like gross margin. And then we can dive into this and see the definition of it. And from a business point of view, they then know that gross margin is defined in this model, and this is a place they can go to access it. So we're basically building up all of that really useful information so the business can understand what this data product is and understand what it consists of and how it's going to be valuable to them. So this is our view of it from a technical point of view in terms of configuring that data product and setting up all of that information. But if we want to look at it from a business point of view, essentially what the business will have access to is this discovery element of the catalog. And in here, they can start to run keyword searches. So they could type in finance, and this will give them all of the data products that are related to finance. But we can also do a natural language search. So I could say, I want to understand the impact of my cost reduction. So I can put in a natural language query and hit enter on this. And then it will use all of that metadata in the platform to start to understand which data sets are going to be most suited to us and which data sets are going to be most valuable for the specific query that we're asking. I'll just check my finance. Yeah, sorry, I've marked this one as draft. So if I publish this again, then it will appear in my queries. So yeah, let's say I want to understand the impact of my cost reduction. This will go off and run that natural language query, and it should show the financial performance model as the top result because that's the more business focused one that's got those metrics in. But I think it's just taken a couple of seconds to sync. But if we click into this and look at this detail, so this is what the business user would see when they land on the page for this model. And they can start to see all of that detail that we've populated and start to understand how to get access to this product. And they've also got the ability here to fill in a form to request access. And this will basically kick off a workflow that goes to a user and gives them that ability, goes to an administrator and gives them that ability to go off and provision access to this model. And you've also got the ability to run automation off the back of that. So we can automate that whole access granting process. So that it's really easy for the users to get access, and we've got those automated approval flows. And then from a user point of view, we can start to get that understanding of what data is in here. So I can understand what data assets make up this data product. And say I'm interested in the account table, I can click into that to get some more detail. And that will show me the description of this table. So this is our GL accounts, and it's given us that categorization of GL accounts. And then we've got all of our descriptions for each column in the table. So we've got all of that detail of what each column is and how it can be used. We're also able to put data classifications in here as well. So if we've got PI fields, we can classify those. And then if we drill into the actual model itself, we can start to understand the lineage of it, so we can understand where it's created from. And if we drill into the lakehouse, we'd be able to see what notebooks are used to generate that as well. So from a business point of view, they can start to understand where data is coming from and how it's being created, and start to build that trust with them that we're not applying logic that they don't understand. We've got that ability, and we've got that clear understanding of where that data has come from. And then if I pop back to our general ledger table, which has some of our measures in, we can start to look at the descriptions of those measures, so like our cost of sales. And then if we hop back to our performance model, we can also look at some of the glossary terms and start to understand, we've got revenue in this model, and what is the specific definition of revenue that we've used to build out this model. So from a business point of view, it's helping them to understand what that data is and giving them that kind of head start in terms of using the data. And we can start to populate this with some really rich information. So like we could include things like tutorials, documentation on where this data should be used and how to get access to it and how to set up tools like Power BI to access it. And then we've also got that ability to, from a lineage point of view, to understand where this data product is being used and also understand who the subscribers are, so who's asked for access to it. So from a technical point of view, it's really useful to give us that understanding and give us that ability to dive into the detail a bit more and understand who our key users are for our products. And then from a user point of view, once we've got that access, we can just click into the link to get access to that data product. And then we can obviously go into Power BI, create a report, and then start slicing and dicing that data and actually making use of it. So say we want to bring on revenue, we can do that. And we could use tools like Copilot as well to start to understand that data and start to make use of it. And because we're starting to build up that really good level of metadata about everything we're building in the platform, it's helping us along that journey towards adopting more natural language queries and giving us that metadata to use tools like Copilot. Because I'm sure some people on this session have tried to experiment with Copilot, and if you've just got a plain vanilla Power BI model, it's not much use. But if you have that metadata and you've got all of those definitions of everything in your model, it makes it really simple to actually use and get some value from. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of some of those tools. So I will switch back to the slide deck and share my screen again, and then we'll just wrap up quickly. So yeah, I think we can publish the slide deck after this session just to give the links to these Microsoft Learn courses. But these are focused around how you can use Purview to govern Fabric, and a bit more focused around that integration between Purview and Fabric. And there's a Microsoft Learn course which gives you a learning path to give you all of those skills that you need and all of that understanding you need to start hooking the two tools together and start using Purview as that front door to Fabric effectively. But yeah, that's all for today's session. So we've got some time left for questions, but I've also included my contact details here. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email if you're interested in this session and you've got any more questions. But yeah, I hope it was useful and hope that everybody got something useful from the session.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for a fantastic presentation and demo. So getting to questions. So the next question is, hi, I'm currently working on implementing data governance using Microsoft Purview. However, I'm concerned about the associated costs. We can see the cost per data asset, but I'm struggling to find a detailed breakdown of other Purview related expenses. Do you have any advice on how and where to monitor these specific costs within my organization? Is there a simplified way to track and manage Purview costs more effectively?
Yeah, unfortunately, cost management is, I'd say, one of the poorer elements of Purview currently. Since Purview's moved to the unified catalog model, it is slightly simpler to get that understanding of what the costs are, because you've got that kind of view of how many assets you've got and your charge per asset. But some of the other elements, particularly around data quality and some of the scanning, it can be quite difficult to understand how those are priced. It is something that is in my view, a gap currently in Purview. But yeah, I think that the only real ways around it are to look at some of the pricing that's coming through on Azure and just look at things like your number of data assets that you've got in there and those kind of things. But to my understanding, there is no real central view currently of what the overall cost of it is.
Perfect. Next question is regarding descriptions of, for example, gross margin you mentioned. Is it possible to do this automated, or is there only the manual way?
Yes, so yeah, something you're able to do within Power BI now, or just by yourself, is to generate those descriptions using Copilot or using some of the Gen AI tools. So that's what I've done it just for the purposes of the demo, is just put the column names into ChatGPT or Copilot and then get it to spit out the description for me. So that kind of gives you that sort of baseline of what the description should be. And then you can start to take that to the business and start to refine those descriptions and get to that point where you've got those really good quality metadata. But I think AI is a good starting point for some of this stuff.
Perfect. Next question is the metadata shown for table and columns, i.e. descriptions, being mastered in Purview, or is it extracted from the assets in Fabric? If in Fabric, how do you capture a description against a column?
Yeah, so what I so the descriptions that you see in the that were shown in my demo, they've all come from the Power BI semantic model. So basically, I've put the descriptions on the tables and columns in the semantic model, and then that's fed through into Purview when it's run the scan. You can also master those descriptions within Purview using the business glossary. But what I tend to recommend is that you do it in the Power BI model and then get that to feed up to Purview, because then you've got that metadata in Power BI as well. Currently within Spark, so within the Lakehouse tables in Fabric, there I don't believe there is a way to add descriptions to the columns. But I know that is a feature in Spark as a tool. So tools like Databricks do have that ability to add descriptions. So I think that is something that will come eventually in Fabric.
Perfect. I think you already answered this one, but someone just said, what about the costs for Purview?
Yeah, so yeah, as I said, for this demo, the cost will be for the scanning, which on a Fabric tenancy, there's not a massive cost to that, because you're just scanning obviously the metadata that's coming out of the API. If you're scanning something like a SQL database, then, or larger databases, then those costs will ramp up in terms of the actual scanning. And then for the catalog itself, you're charged per asset that goes into the catalog.
Perfect. And then the last question is, what's on the roadmap for Fabric or Purview that organizations should be aware of when planning long-term investments?
Yeah, so I think both with Fabric and Purview, they're both really rapidly evolving products, and obviously there's lots of features coming down the line in Fabric to particularly help with some of that more enterprise ready level features. So if you're at FabCon in Vegas, you'll have seen things like One Lake security being released, and that gives you that ability to have that single security model within Fabric. I think from the Purview side, we're seeing it mature more as a governance tool and seeing more of a business focus on it. So you've obviously got that unified catalog now, and you've got quite a nice interface for the business to interact with and get access to that data. I think probably what we'll start to see is more close integration between Purview and Fabric, because obviously if you've got Fabric, you've got that really good technical platform to ingest your data and transform it. But you need Purview on top to get that value from the data. So I suspect we'll start to see some closer integration between the two.
Perfect. Just one more question. Which would be an alternative for Purview, documenting with semantic link within Notebook and extracting as HTML?
Yeah, so yeah, as an alternative to Purview, you could obviously use something like semantic link to generate the documentation and pull out the metadata from the model, and then push that to something like Markdown or an Excel file, even as your sort of data dictionary. I think that obviously the nice thing about Purview is it gives you that interface on top of the data. So it gives you that nice way to interact with and that nice interface for the business to work with. But yeah, you can obviously get access to that metadata yourself.
Perfect. So I think that's all the questions. So on behalf of the ESPC community, a heartfelt thank you to you, Ben, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
So that's all we have today. So you'll be able to catch the recording in our resource center. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you join us again soon. Take care.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you.